I'm Nick Barrow, movie critic for NovaStream Network.
And I'm Georja Malt, lover of literature and founder of With G Digital.
And welcome to The Book Was Better, a monthly podcast with Georgia and myself in which we read a popular novel, watch the movie that the book was adapted into, and discuss the age-old debate of which was better, the book or the film. Thank you all for tuning in to this show that we love doing ever so much. Forces me to read a book every month, forces Georgia to watch a movie every month. Then there's nothing better, I think, in the world than that. If you are watching us on YouTube, thank you so much. If you do like the episode, please consider subscribing and liking. And if you're listening to us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and as always, our two listeners on iHeartRadio, we love you.
We see you.
We see you. We love you. We iHeart you. But we are coming in off a hot episode last month of Shawshank Redemption, which we had some great feedback of. So thank you all for listening to that episode. But obviously, as you found out at the end of that episode, that it was George's pick for the month of October. So why don't you run over what we're going to be discussing today?
Yes, so I get to do it.
Yeah, it's it's all yours.
Okay, well, we're doing The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Yes.
So this book, I think I have actually mentioned it on the podcast before because this book is very significant to me.
Right.
It kind of was really that transition. I think I was about 14, 15 when I read it.
Okay.
And it was really that transition for me from like young adult books, that really like fantasy genre that young teens read, into that more alternate literature and modern fiction.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, it was kind of, from there it was really like almost like I'd call it a gateway drug into into some more intense books like, The Catcher in the Rye.
Right.
And it really...
Which is funny because this book, and I guess in this movie, sort of touches on the main character's Charlie's inspirations by those sorts of, well, not necessarily Catcher in the Rye, but that sort of almost like him in the book going into that part of his life and the books that he was reading.
Absolutely,
it seems like
very parallel.
Parallel's a good word.
Yeah,
yes.
And I kind of like, it set me off on a similar journey that we see Charlie's English teacher set him off in the book. And it just exposed me to a lot of culturally, significant pieces of literature, it really started the path to be the reader I am today. I would almost say, like, that's how
this is a pretty formative,
impactful. Yeah,
pretty formative book for you.
It absolutely was. So holds a very special place in my heart. So I was really excited to do it.
Yeah.
And what about you? What's your first time reading it?
First time reading it, I was definitely aware of the book when the movie came out.
Yeah.
So I saw the movie first, obviously, classic. And I saw it. I didn't see it at the cinemas. I remember seeing it on Blu-ray here, obviously. This is an old copy from Blockbuster at Cannon Hill where I worked.
Where you worked? Yeah. Oh, the infamous Blockbuster
One of the movies I picked up in the closing down sale. Rest in peace, Blockbuster. But I saw it there, and I remember enjoying the film. But I was exposed to it through friends who, a certain friend who was obsessed with the book as well. And I never read it, obviously, but I was obviously aware of then its cultural impact then. But I kind of hadn't touched the movie. Like I'd never forgotten about the movie, I guess, but it's never a movie I'd revisited since. It's been, almost 10, 11 years since I watched it. And I mean, off the bat, just saying, I forgot how damn good it is.
Yeah, it is a good movie.
But reading the book now as well, I was aware that it was written as Charlie's diary entries. Like I knew that going into it.
Well, it's like letters to an anonymous person.
Totally,
and I actually learnt a new thing.
Oh,
that style of book is called an epistolary style book, where it's presented as letters between characters.
Right. Which is funny because it's letters.
Fun fact.
Would it still be a Sorry, no, I'm confused myself. Sorry.
I was like, I've lost it.
That word we said before, even though it's just Charlie writing letters.
Yeah, it still counts.
Interesting. Yeah, cool.
It's just like the letter format.
The format. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, I was definitely a movie before the book. But this to me was an interesting read because I think we discussed briefly on the last episode. The only other book that I've read that was kind of like this was Gone Girl, which had Amy's diary entries in it, which is obviously this is more letters and this is a little bit more straightforward, I guess, than Gone Girl. So I was definitely intrigued to see how I reacted to the structure, I guess, of this. But do you have anything about the book, anything interesting, any facts you want to run us by about Stephen Chbosky's book?
Yeah, well, he was really such a more in the movie scene, wasn't he? Like he
It's
really
interesting,
wrote
yeah.
a lot of screenplays, and then in 1999 he released The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
That's crazy to me that this came. Like I know the book is set in 91, but
Yeah.
the fact that like this came out in 1999, I was like, oh, this definitely struck me as more of a movie and a book that would have come out in that mid 2000s when these sorts of things were on the rise. So I was quite intrigued to find that out.
I think just like the movie was so in that time as well. So it just kind of like, that's what you think of it. But yeah, no, it was a book quite a long time before it was a movie. He said he sat down and wrote this one line, which I can't remember what it was. And he wrote it and he was like, that's the character I'm trying to write about. Like through this one line, he was like, that's Charlie.
Okay.
And it sort of just set him on this path.
Was it the one where because obviously when I was doing a little bit of my research, it was why do good people hang around with people who don't treat them good or something like that? I remember that was a pivotal thing. Paraphrasing, of course, but yeah, it was pretty much about like
people like accept the love they think they
not
deserve.
not necessarily that line, which obviously is now iconic in regards to both book and film.
Yeah.
But I think he was writing something like about why do good people hang around the people that don't treat them good or something like that.
Yeah,
like,
I know what you mean. And that
Charlie through and through, to be honest.
Yeah,
so.
it is. Like he's really just trying to figure stuff out.
He
Bless
really,
him.
oh bless him. He's only 15.
yeah.
That's what I got to keep remembering when I read this story. Hey,
something else I found was that in 2007, the New York Times said that it had. So this is in 2007. It had sold more than 700,000 copies, but it's well into the millions now.
Oh, yeah,
and
totally.
this was a quote. They said, "Is passed around from adolescent to adolescent like a hot potato." And it's so
Shout
true
out
because
to the
I think
Wiggles.
it just really resonated with a lot
Totally.
of people. And like I remember in that time of my life, it really felt so significant.
It's like one of those things like when you read it and it impacts you so much, you want other people to experience it the way you did as well. So
so I think like I'm not alone in it being like a massive impact like in terms of reading. But because like I know Stephen was very involved in the movie. Like he wrote the screenplay, which is so rare.
Super involved. So that's the rarest thing, right? Is
Yeah.
that so he was from 1999 when the book came out. He wrote the screenplay within a year of the book coming out. So he's had a version of the screenplay since 2000.
I mean, I'm not surprised since he was so involved in.
Totally, yeah, because this was Chbosky's second feature film. So he directed a movie in 1995. So 17 years later, he directed this as his second film.
And I think I saw he also wrote the screenplay for Rent.
He did, yeah, the 2005 film version of Rent.
That was very successful, wasn't it?
Super successful, like incredibly successful. So he 17 years between directorial efforts, but he obviously, like you said, he'd been writing screenplays and he'd been sitting on this one for a while. But his caveat the whole time was, I'm not going to sell the rights to the book unless I can write and direct the film. So he sold the rights to a production company that was run by John Malkovich. The actor John, you know John. I'll quickly show you a photo for the people at home. Just Google John Malkovich. That fella.
Oh, him.
Yeah. So he had a production company and he was like, yep, we'll buy the rights. You can run your screenplay and you can direct the film, which is incredibly rare that it happens. Probably happening a little bit more now, mainly on the screenplay side of things. Like we've seen Gillian Flynn, it might be Gillian.
I'm not sure actually.
We'll find out when we do one of her books. Wrote the screenplay for Gone Girl, wrote the screenplay for Dark Places and Sharp Objects and whatnot. So we're seeing that happen a little bit more. Very rare that the author also gets to direct their films. So
rare.
Probably helped that he directed a comedy in 1995, but since then he's obviously done Wonder, and he's probably most popular not just for this film, but he did Dear Evan Hansen.
Oh yes,
as well.
Yeah.
Which I guess
didn't love that one, but
didn't love it. Tonally very similar to Perks, but I didn't love the film adaptation of Dear Evan Hansen. But we don't have to cover that today. But
sorry, Stephen.
Sorry.
If you're listening.
Sorry. But the film premiered 2012 at the Toronto International Film Festival, which is probably like the best place this sort of movie can.
My gosh. It'd be the darling of
it'd be the darling of the festival. Standing ovation, which doesn't always happen at TIFF. Like you always hear about it like Venice and Cannes Film Festival and stuff, but like got a standing ovation at TIFF and was then released in cinemas a couple of weeks after that. Was made for $13 million. Box office raked in $33 million, so it was a success. It made a bit of money there.
Almost like an indie film as well.
Absolutely, was an indie film. Yeah, like it's
not going to be like Marvel. It's not for the generic public. Like not everyone.
Also, a $13 million budget is not that much money. There was a very small budget for this film, but on Rotten Tomatoes, 85% critic score. So it's
Wow.
very highly regarded.
Yeah.
And I think audience was about 89. So a
that's
lot of
great.
people do love this movie, including myself. I genuinely rewatched it last night, obviously for the show, but like I was sitting there and I was like, normally, like I'm a big note taker. I had to find myself, keep reminding myself to take notes because I was really invested in the film. Whenabouts did you come to the film? So I came to the book first time for this show, but when did you first watch the movie?
Well, the movie came out after I'd read the book.
Yes.
So because what year was the movie out?
2012.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. So I was in,
Yeah, so
I was
he
in
was
grade
sitting on that script
12
for a long
and,
time, yeah.
and I was like 14 or 15 when I read the book.
Right.
So not only was I excited because I love the book, but also my crush, which I've also discussed on this show,
Yes.
Logan Lerman was the
second
title
timer,
character.
Percy Jackson himself.
My second love after Daniel Radcliffe.
You
third
really
if you count Ash Ketchum.
You're really getting the pick of the bunch, actually. You've got to cover Radcliffe and Lerman.
I know.
And then you had Brad Pitt. We got to throw Braddy in there as well. So.
Don't mind a bit of Brad.
Jeez,
Who does?
Lucky.
Yeah, but yeah, so I was like, is this a dream? Like, am I dreaming?
Yeah.
I was stoked. And so I saw it in the cinema. And
Oh, true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I remember on my Facebook cover photo,
Yeah.
I made this like typewriter font and it was like, I swear we're infinite with like that rainbow photo, like glitch thing, like the most
We are
indie, like year, 2012 cover.
It was a different time.
I had my
Facebook was
owl
a
necklace
different-
on.
Oh
I was
my
like-
God. Yeah.
Thought
It's
I was so
funny.
indie and cool.
It's so funny you say that too, because Rhiannon last night was in the scene where it's Charlie's birthday and they get him to blow out the candles. She's like, I have that photo saved on my phone. Like, I had that. And I was like, still? Like, it's 10 years later. So, obviously, a massive hit with the young adult audience back then. Obviously, I enjoyed it then, but it just hasn't resonated as much. But it's funny going back now and then now having read the book to be like, I forgot Charlie's character was 15.
Yeah, okay.
So I was concerned going into when I first read that he's like 15 years old. I was like, is this going to be like middle-aged man? Like my first thought was legitimately Percy Jackson. I was like, oh, middle-aged man writing 15-year-old. But in both the book and the film, it does genuinely feel like what a teenager would say. And
he does a good job.
Because he's a very intelligent teenager as well, by the way. This is... He has one of them...
straight A's and he's just... the way he looks at the world and interpret things
a
is
very
clearly...
mature outlook.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest concern going in, but I was pleasantly surprised. But I guess we'll start with the book and how we sort of feel about it in general and sort of a general rundown of the film and the book itself. So we follow Charlie. He's 15 years old and he's just been released from hospital. He's been released from hospital after a mental incident or a mental breakdown of sorts. We don't really find out why too early on in either the book or the film, but it's his first year of high school and he's nervous about going to high school.
I feel in the book we find out straight away about Michael though.
I was just going to say that actually, because in the notes I wrote, it's very different how they handle Michael or the reveal of Michael. So in the book, it's in his first diary entry.
It's very
I keep calling
straight
diary.
up, yeah.
His first letter.
Yeah.
He writes about how his friend Michael committed suicide and that was part of the reason he had his breakdown and went to hospital. Whereas in the film, we find out probably about like halfway through after the pot brownie scene.
Yeah.
Is where he reveals it to Sam for the first time. So we do find that out early and we get a bit more context and obviously things are revealed a bit later on as to, a lot of where his traumas come from. But like his first year of high school, he, and we deal with family dynamics of like, relationship between his mum and dad seems a bit distant, between his brother and sister is closer, but still weirdly distant. And his sort of, not inability, but the difficulty to make friends. And how he forms a relationship with Patrick and Sam, two seniors at the high school, forms a relationship in the terms of like, with the teacher, Mr. Anderson and stuff, but in the sense of, him introducing him to literature and stuff. So it's kind of like literally the
Not really
title
much happens, I guess.
Not much happens, but like the title kind of makes it the perks of being a wallflower. Like we are sort of like the wallflower a little, like we're sitting at the back and like
that's so
watching Charlie's life sort of play out as he tells us what happens. And
That's so true.
And it's kind of a really nice coming of age story. But yeah, so the book is told completely through these letters. So structurally, how did you, what was your initial reaction, I guess, to that?
I loved it.
You loved it? Yeah.
I loved the writing. I loved it. I love it. I love the book. I'm a big fan.
How do you find the information drops then? Like, because there's a lot of things where certain letters are obviously written to reveal certain bits of information, whereas other letters are more just giving you an idea of Charlie's headspace.
Yeah.
In that time as well. Did you feel like any of it was disjointed or?
I felt like it was disjointed, but I think it was
that's kind of purposeful.
And like I find the way Charlie talks about things and like the random subject change is really funny. Like I don't know, like
I get that. Yeah.
I just found it really enjoyable. Like I didn't find it disjointed in the way that I found Fight Club disjointed. Like I felt like, and it's also very Catcher in the Rye. Like if you've read Catcher in the Rye, that's even more disjointed and he's even more completely mental. Like, but you know, Charlie's got like this real sweetness about him, and it's
the innocence. It's like a kid who hasn't experienced the world yet, but has had things happen to him that shouldn't happen to a child. Obviously, that has forced him to grow up in a way, probably not maybe in a healthy or the right way, or like hasn't had direction in that way. But yeah, it's kind of like a kid who's experienced adult themes who's not experienced the world yet. And it's kind of fun watching him go back and forth. There's a scene in the movie where I think they epitomize that perfectly, and it's towards the end, so like slight spoilers, but this has been out for 10 years. But when so get on it if you haven't already. The first kiss scene between him and Sam, I was watching it under the guise of like, I think some people would probably think it's quite sweet. He has his first kiss with someone who loves him, but I saw it as this is probably an incredibly confusing moment for Charlie as well. As a kid trying to understand his emotions. But and it's the same with Sam as well. She's not someone who completely understands what she wants to do and what her purpose or potential is. And that kind of, to me, especially after reading the book, I think really put a nice little candle on this whole, this is about a boy's experience, a confused boy trying to find his potential and his purpose. And I think that scene encapsulates it really well in the film, because I was watching Logan Lerman's reactions and I was like, oh, Charlie's just confused. Like everyone is at 15, you know what I mean? So
I think for me, it was easy for me to kind of be like, Sam, why, like, you know, he's in love with you. Why would you do this? But then
it was a vulnerable moment for her.
But then I have to remember that she's only 17 and she's also had a lot of trauma.
So, and is going through the exact same
I'm thinking of her as being so much older, so much more emotionally mature, but she's not.
She's 2 years
once
older,
I sort of like brought myself back,
I
was like, okay.
Oh, and it's not a scene where I hated, like I was like, Sam, why are you doing this to Charlie? I think it's just two very emotionally vulnerable, immature people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you kind of can't help but feel protective more of Charlie.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that aspect. But to me, that's what I feel like the whole story is about, is just working, not even working your way through the confusion, but just outlining like how frustrating growing up and coming of age is. And when you don't have proper direction, when you don't have, you know, it's not that Patrick and Sam are bad role models, but they are also two people who have incredibly traumatic things happen to them both before and during the story, that you kind of go like, it's beautiful that they have this friendship, but it's tough to not feel protective of, especially Charlie.
First, I wanted to quickly ask you, did you not like the book structure?
I struggled with it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Okay, I will say early on I did, and I was actually quite annoyed at the book with
that's so interesting,
so
isn't
weird,
it? Because
hey,
I just loved it from the first page.
And I get it, but like it probably took me about 50 pages before I started getting really comfortable with it. And then obviously I think for me, as certain story elements start getting revealed and we sort of get into the more very dramatic, more adult themes of the book, I was finding that Charlie's recollection of them through these letters was a little bit more focused. Whereas like, I'll call it, for lack of a better phrase, the world building of like the first 40, 50 pages was a little bit scatterbrained. But then after watching the movie last night, I'm like, oh, the movie is pretty similar in that regard too. Like the first 15 minutes of the movie, a lot happens. Like we're introduced to we're introduced to the family, we're introduced to Mr. Anderson, we're introduced to Patrick and Sam. Even who's the guy who Patrick hooks up with? Brad Hayes. I was thinking Brady for some reason. Brad. Brady. Brad, we're introduced to him as well. So we're introduced to a lot of characters early on in the film. So I was like, okay, so he's done a good job Stephen Chbosky of melding that or adapting that to film as well. So I think that's just more of a maybe I just wasn't in the headspace of taking that much information.
So you
early
found
on.
this more difficult than Fight Club?
No. I definitely think Fight Club, and it's probably like an interest thing as well. Like obviously, like I love Fight Club, and as we've discussed in previous episodes, I can go to dark places sometimes. I don't mind some cooked shit. Whereas there was probably a bit of too much glee in the first. I don't know. It's not even glee.
Well, I don't know. This is what I would say. If I had to put it down to two words of the difference between the book and the movie, I would say that the book is more melancholy and the movie is more whimsical.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. And there's I think the biggest change between the book and the movie is the perfect example of that is the tunnel song.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
in the movie, obviously they play "We Could Be Heroes." It's the scene where Charlie, Sam, and Patrick are in the car, and they're just
and the tunnel scene's pivotal in the book too.
Yeah,
like you know what I mean.
It is, but they play
Melancholy versus Landslide by
Landslide, which just wouldn't have had the same vibe on screen.
No, it wouldn't have. But I think it makes your point. I think it solidifies your point that that's a very melancholy song. That's a very sort of like. Because even in the movie, and it happens in the book too, they talk about Charlie's mixtapes for Sam and how Craig comes in. He's like, "These are songs are depressing, bro. This is a party." Where it's like
that's in the movie, but not in the book.
It's not in the book.
Yeah.
But it's But I think that's kind of harpens on your point as well. Like those are very melancholy songs. They make you feel, and it's not necessarily sad, but it just you feel melancholy from
like
it.
The book just has this lingering sadness more than the film. Like the book. I think because there are actually quite a lot of changes.
Oh, big changes.
And
yeah.
like I would say that Charlie himself is a big change.
Yep.
Because in the book, Charlie's definitely, I think he is quieter. He cries a lot in the book.
Yes.
He's constantly crying.
Yep.
Whereas Logan Lerman's portrayal of him is just that little bit more confident, little bit less socially awkward, funnier. Like just that little bit more extroverted.
Which works in the whimsical nature of the film,
I think it works for the film. But in the book, like I definitely thought that Charlie was on the spectrum, which is apparently not the case.
Okay, so it's so funny you say that because I said this and I remember saying it to Rhiannon because Rhiannon, I was obviously reading, going to bed reading and Rhiannon's like, what do you think? I'm like, I genuinely think that Charlie's like has Asperger's on the autism spectrum or something because of the way he recounts information. It's very direct and it's very to the point. And for someone who, especially in the movie, it's harpened on how everyone talks about how amazing of a writer he could be. I was reading these letters and going like, yeah, okay, like I kind of, I guess. Like it didn't to me strike me as someone who is a very creative writer, but his ability to recollect information.
But I think the way he recollects information and the way he writes his observations is rare. Like if you were to sit down and write about your day, you might not pull out the same. Not saying you can't write, mate. Sorry, I'm like you couldn't do it. I'm like you couldn't do it for shit. Nah, but you know what I mean. Like not everyone has that. Not everyone has that ability to.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
To view the world in that way to write and to record it.
Yeah.
So, but I think his high intelligence paired with his past trauma is what kind of gives us that impression. I mean, he could. I mean, the spectrum is very varied.
Oh God, yeah, that's why it's a spectrum. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I just felt that more in the book.
You're not alone in thinking that though, because definitely in the book, I felt like there was suspicion. So it's interesting. So has Chbosky come out and said that he's not? Well, there's been no confirmation.
There's been no really solidified. Like,
is that pretty common amongst the readers, like the fans? I don't know if you know this, but
I think it's been discussed.
Yeah,
It's definitely a point of discussion, but most people seem to think no.
You don't get that in the movie though. Absolutely don't.
He just sort of seems a bit shy.
He's shy. He's just sort of like
more reserved.
He's a wallflower.
Something else I don't know if you felt this because I feel like I'm quite alone in this. I thought that Sam and Patrick seemed like through the book, I feel like we more see Charlie's family and his relationship with Mary Elizabeth. Whereas when you think about his actual interactions with Sam and Patrick, they're not a lot. Like he speaks very highly of them and he speaks of them, but not like I almost felt like in the movie they're more shown.
Yes.
I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. And I think that to me was one of the changes I noticed in the film is that it's more about the three-way friendship.
Yes.
And then they're all sort of living their own stories at the same time.
Yeah. That's all through the eyes of Charlie.
All through the eyes of Charlie, of course. Because, and in the movie specifically, you get to see it's always his reactions to when Sam meets Craig and when Craig comes into it. There's always negative connotation because it's through Charlie's eyes because he's in love with Sam. Same with Patrick and then when Brad's dad finds out that they've been sleeping together and Brad gets beaten up because of it. We all see that through Charlie's eyes. He sees the reaction when Patrick gets tripped over, and then obviously that's in the film the start of the next mental breakdown happening. So, whereas we don't see the reveal of Brad's dad finding them, and we don't see Brad getting beaten up. So I think a lot of that told through Charlie's eyes and the focus on the three friends in the film is kind of what gives it that uplifting nature because they all get to come together during these moments that are pretty intense and pretty sad and pretty horrifying for them. Whereas I agree in the book, it's very much Charlie. We see everything from his
it's just
point
like
of view.
I love Sam and Patrick. I hope they call. I hope they do this. But it's not so much like actual. Or it's like we went to Big Boy, but you don't get any time.
There's nothing
at
about
Big
the
Boy.
conversations.
Yeah,
that
like
happen.
I think it's like very like they feel very more sub-character, whereas his family, he has a lot
Huge
more
in the family
interactions. Like he goes and sees his extended family that you find out more about. His mum, the fact that his Aunt Helen was abused by a family friend.
Yeah, so that doesn't come across. It's very much. That element, especially with Aunt Helen, is very much breezed over in the film and the conversation with the sister when Ponytail Derek, who's played by Greg from Succession.
Yes.
So great to see him in a ponytail.
Also, I have to say this, that like it's mentioned he has a ponytail in the book, but he's not called Ponytail Derek.
I love it.
And I loved that addition. It was so funny. Oh shit, your sister's dating Ponytail Derek.
Even the sister calls him Ponytail Derek, which is great. But in the conversation after Ponytail Derek hits her, Charlie says like, you don't want, or along the phrase of, you don't want a boyfriend like Aunt Helen's boyfriends. Like you don't want to go through the same things Aunt Helen did. So it's like very briefly alluded to, whereas in the book, it's a very...
But it's childhood sex. It's when she's a child, she's sexually abused by a family friend and she tells and they don't believe her. So the friend keeps coming over, which is terrible.
So crazy.
And then she grows
so
up and
gross.
gets into physically abusive relationships.
Man,
So she's... it's terrible.
It's terrible, yeah.
But in the book,
much.
they don't sort of talk about, they more just focus on the physically abusive relationships because also it's complicated because the grandfather is just such a grandfather character. But he's like tough as nails, but then he's like got this like real soft spot.
Soft, like caramel sensor, doesn't it? Hey, yeah.
Like the family is really so much more prevalent in the book, and they kind of replace that with religious elements, like him going to church with his family.
Yeah.
Because that's not
praying over dinner and stuff.
But that's not noted in the book. But how he goes to church and communion and stuff.
To me, that strikes me as more of a placing the film in the 90s for me, which, because it's never actually said in the film when it's set, which obviously the book takes place in 1991. So whereas under the assumption that would also be the case, but I think that's more of a show don't tell when America was in a very much like the family goes to church and like this is a part of the family identity and we are a family who
they're just like that classic American family.
So the nuclear family, right? Yeah. And then speaking of family as well, the brother gets shafted in the film when he comes back for that one scene. He comes back for Thanksgiving or whatever, which to me, I do love that scene because it's funny because it kind of shows not the ignorance, well, a little bit actually, a little bit of the ignorance of the parents, which is kind of touched on in the book, but his brother is the first person in his family to ask how he's going. No, you don't see anyone, not even the sister really until the end, where they talk about Charlie coming out of the hospital and him being okay the first time anyway. But it's his brother where he goes, are you actually okay, Charlie?
Yeah.
And I love that because to me, I felt that was a stronger relationship between the brother and the sister than the parents. But in the book, even though that they are pretty ignorant, like they're a very sweep under the rug sort of family initially, I think the book does a really I think the movie did well with the limited showing of the brother, I think, in that case.
Yeah, and like obviously the brother's a huge football star.
Totally,
and yeah. Like it...
Living dad's dream,
I just
basically.
Think it feels like such a real family because you can tell there's a lot of love and care there, but these are imperfect people who are trying their best to connect with each other and be there for each other, but they have their own issues, their own problems.
Yeah.
And I missed those moments in the movie. Like I loved the family stories, and like you know in the movie you just have the brother coming in, hey, little sister, so you know that she's the sister. I was like, okay, that's an obvious just like when you say little sis, like, hey, little sister.
Just her name, because I think the reaction of the mum hugging him and the
was
dad
enough to know it's
I was
the
like,
brother.
oh, it's the brother's home, right? Because Charlie speaks earlier in the film about how his brother is away at college playing football. Like, you will figure it out.
Yeah, like it was just kind of like that was a bit obvious to me. And then like the sister and him argue a lot in the book and like because it's just I don't know the dynamics. I think I just related to my own family a lot.
No, okay,
where you just have all that extended family and everyone's got their own issues and that you're this weird family love that you have for each other, even though it's like you kind of like don't really know each other in a lot of ways. And it's really hard to explain.
It's the universal feeling through the specific nature of the book. Yeah. But I think that comes back to your point about how the book is about the family and the movie is about the friends.
And I get why they did that because I think the Friends more applies to that audience. Like people like watching about people their own age. Like they wouldn't want to see Charlie go to his cousins for Easter.
How depressing the film would have been.
Sorry, the backwards high five there.
Yeah, we're in agreement. The film would have been so much more depressing had it been a direct adaptation, and I don't think it would have held up as long because there isn't it's not that there's no uplifting things in the book or there's no redemption by the end, because the whole last letter, which is about 7 or 8 pages long, I think, so it's like the biggest letter in the book, it still deals with the fact that Charlie does have a second breakdown and in his sort of his revelations about certain things, but there's still a hopeful nature by the end of it, and we hear about the tunnel for the last time and stuff. So there are similarities between the book's ending and the movie's ending, but I think everything that happens in between, it was right to be. I mean, I don't know if this is true as well. This could be and Steven Chbosky expanding the story more. I mean, like I wanted to tell more about Patrick and Sam, and this is my opportunity to do it maybe. So I don't know, it's quite interesting, I guess.
Yeah, it is. One thing that I would have to, if I pull out one moment from the family thing I loved, it was when Charlie talks about that time they all watched the final episode of MASH.
Yes, yeah.
And he goes into the kitchen and he finds his dad crying, which he's never seen before. And so for Christmas, Charlie buys him episodes of MASH, and the dad like winks at him like he remembers their special little moment. And the
dad's a bit of is similar to the granddad, right? Hard shell, soft center. And just especially with the way he talks about the pride in his son, who the big brother who's gone off to play football,
but he still loves Charlie.
He does,
like even though Charlie's not this like son that he probably always dreamed, he's not cruel to him or like disappointed to him.
He still loves
which
him,
I think is nice, but he just isn't great at communicating.
Not great at showing it, which I think is a very 90s dad thing, especially in film. I'm guessing like it's a very 90s dad.
And one of the sentences that made me maybe one of the saddest, it really sat with me. It was very throwaway. I don't know if you catched it, but it was sort of towards the end of the book where Charlie's talking about how maybe if these things hadn't happened to people in the past, things would have turned out differently.
Yeah.
And essentially, I believe the grandfather also was a little bit physically abusive to the girls. I think it's indicated, or they had some issue that there was physical violence in the house. And Charlie says, and maybe if my grandfather hadn't hit my mother and Aunt Helen, my mother wouldn't have just married a man because he didn't hit.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's pretty.
So Charlie's kind of alluding that his mum just settled for his dad because he wasn't a violent man, but not because she particularly loved him.
Yeah,
and like
which
I was
think as well is kind of like
that really just was like bit.
It's tough, hey. It's a tough pill to swallow. Like
I was like, that's so sad.
It's funny though. It's sad, but I kind of the film I think as well doesn't go that deep into it as well. And I remember the line now you were talking about it, but I hadn't really put 2 and 2 together. There's no real moments of affection between the mum and dad in the film either.
They never shows them overly in love. Like they're never dancing in the kitchen or showing like this particular bliss, but it's just a content.
The only time we really see them interacting in a way that they have to be a mum and dad is when they find out what happened to Charlie with Aunt Helen. And it's just one shot. It's them consoling each other to be like, you know, we can't believe this happened to our son, and this has been part of the reason he has these mental breakdowns. So it's very very interestingly
every Saturday night when the parents would go out and she'd babysit. Terrible.
Don't wake up your sister. It's so
gross.
So I guess in saying that, we do find out that Aunt Helen was molesting Charlie.
Oh God.
Which is awful. And
Charlie, he loved her so much.
Yeah, I know. And the parallels of it in regards to, obviously we spoke about the MASH thing, getting the Charlie getting his dad the episodes of MASH and the Christmas present, and then obviously the scene in the film where he gives everyone the Christmas presents and stuff, and he's just very giving, and he's an active listener. He knows what everyone's like. But then that's intercut, especially in the film, with moments where the big moment, I guess, being that Aunt Helen was going to get Charlie's birthday present, that she doesn't like giving gifts to him as well. And it's funny how that sort of cyclically came back for Charlie, where he was like, I appreciate giving people because my Aunt Helen did it for me. But he's obviously repressed this trauma so heavily that he genuinely blacks out, which is horrifying.
It's awful.
And then he finds out about, Aunt Helen dies in a car accident getting the birthday present, and
he blames himself for
that as well. Yeah. But he also saw Aunt Helen harming herself as well. And it's just the last sort of 15 minutes of the film, because it's drawn out a little bit more in the book.
Yeah, you're on the journey of the decline in the book.
Because the reveal happens at different places.
Yes,
so in the movie, we kind of start getting instances of it during the first kiss scene between Sam and Charlie, because Sam starts rubbing Charlie's leg as they kiss. And he sort of goes in and out of the kiss, and he's kind of like, there's something not right here. Whereas we find out before that scene that Aunt Helen was abusing him. Sorry, caught in my throat. No. I'm just getting so choked up about it. And we find out.
If you shed a tear on this podcast, I wouldn't even know what to do.
It'll be the first time I've cried in decades almost.
Oh, that sounds like a challenge for Rhiannon. Look out.
I know. Oh, speaking of shedding tears, I watched this with Rhiannon last night and she was gone for like the last 20 minutes of the movie. So, and I was moved by it, just not moved to tears, unfortunately. Sorry. But yeah, and those it's revealed earlier for Charlie that what Aunt Helen was doing to him. So it's interesting that how the reveals, I think that in the book, the reveal where it happens works really well, and I liked where it happened in the film. I think that's a change that I actually appreciated about because it didn't disrupt the flow of the film. I think if the reveal about Aunt Helen happened earlier in the film, I think it would have actually disrupted the flow of the film. But using the leg touch as sort of a trigger moment for Charlie really kind of puts you into that next bit of we're going into the third act of the film.
I think that they didn't do that in the movie because in the book he completely freaks out and sleeps on the couch, but it's sort of just like he kind of goes, I'm okay, and then him and Sam sort of kiss and go off camera.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's not as
obvious. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
In the movie, it's not as
I think up until that point, though, you're not as suspicious about Aunt Helen.
No, it's more jarring in the film. It's more
jarring in the film where you kind of go, oh, okay, something isn't actually right here. So,
But I think they didn't want to portray Sam too negatively, in that
I get that.
I get that. That whole, I don't know, just this cloud on their relationship on screen. I don't know.
No, and it makes sense. Again, it comes back to, like you were saying, it's a less dark, melancholy way of looking at it for sure.
Yeah.
It's not
he had a moment, but then he was like, oh, it's all right. I love Sam. I'm just going to keep kissing her or whatever. But in the book, he's very stop. He fully freaks out.
He freaks out. It's tough to read as well. You feel really bad for.
So bad.
Yes, it's definitely and for something that we have praised the film for as being whimsical, it is also still quite confronting then when that happens because but the movie doesn't shy away. The book is very to the point about a lot of the things. So we got like outside of, the child abuse and mental health issues, we've got the fact that Sam was also abused.
Yeah, terrible.
Which is just disgusting when it's described by a dad's boss. Patrick is obviously dealing with the fact that he's in love with a guy who...
Very closeted
person who then they have a confrontation together in the cafeteria after he calls him the F word.
Charlie goes full WWE wrestling. Man. In the book, he slams a metal cafeteria chair over one of them.
I love it, and I would love to have seen it.
And I know. That's what Kyle said. He was like, I wish we'd seen the fight.
I do like the way that Chbosky... It blacks out and you kind of he wakes up too.
It just kind of like wouldn't have been the same movie to have a fight scene.
No,
like
totally,
it would have changed the whole
It wouldn't have
vibe.
fit. It wouldn't have fit. And because we do see a glimpse of him punching someone in the throat, but it's during that last 15 minutes as sort of he's recounting everything that happened. So
obviously the brothers taught him how to fight so he can hold his own.
And he
actually has another fight in the book as well with like a bully, but that's obviously not like I understand why they left that out. But
No, that's true. And because we get a little instance with the bullies early on in the film as well. So there's a lot from the book that did make the film in a condensed, adapted version, but obviously the differences between the focuses and the tonal nature probably changed that as well.
That bully in English class isn't in the book though. But
I think
she was just put in there to like really highlight that Charlie is an outsider and is a loser.
She's the every bully, right? Like she's like she is the amalgamation of all of them in the book.
It just really helps you like straight away see Charlie's social standing, that he's an outcast and that he's, So I think like there's a lot of tools that Chbosky uses to get things across quicker, which you have to do.
Yeah, totally. And because this movie flies by too. It's like a 100-minute movie, and it goes by quick. I mean, I wouldn't have hated another 10, 15 minutes of things to...
Yeah.
But at the same time, it tells the story in a very compact way, which I always enjoy. I think it's all necessary information in there.
And while we're on storytelling...
Yes.
So what did you think of the casting?
Okay, love this. So...
Give me a breakdown.
We'll start with Charlie. Logan Lerman, fantastic.
Nailed it. His crying scene?
So I wanted to mention it there, but I'm glad we left it till now because you're talking about how he cries a lot in the book, but he only cries at the end of the film and he tells himself to stop crying. He's wiping away.
I got goosebumps. I was so
fountains
sad.
of tears and he's going, stop crying, stop crying.
That's probably what really made Rhiannon cry because I feel like she does that.
Yeah, probably actually. She was literally going, stop crying, stop crying. He is brilliant, but it's not just this massive emotional last sort of 10, 15 minutes of the film he has to do because I'll talk about this scene as well though, is that when the full reveal about what Aunt Helen's done to him and the beginning of his big mental breakdown is the only time I felt Steven Chbosky actually had some decent direction in the film. Controversial, this come from the film loving guy, but I thought this was a really bland looking movie.
Okay.
Could be budgetary stuff, whatever, but every scene was overblown lighting to give you this sort of again whimsical feel, it's in this sort of dreamlike
It's
state.
like a Tumblr movie though.
It is very much a Tumblr movie.
So maybe it just knew its audience.
Potentially.
Like girls wearing owl necklaces who loved the book and wanted to be infinite.
This
like
is
me.
the Tumblr movie. So the direction appeals to you guys, but for someone who loves cinema.
Not me now, but me at 15.
I just think more the way the camera moves and some of the shots. I just found it was very much
a one note.
Yeah, a point and shoot movie, which is fine because the acting for the most part and the story is riveting enough that I was drawn in. But I love the way he edits the final, that beginning of the breakdown, and we get the cuts to moments in the film that are different now when Charlie feels that anxiety of everyone looking at him like he's different. Those scenes where everyone's turning their heads and looking at him is kind of terrifying. It's like a real horror sort of moment. The angles that Chbosky uses, he uses a lot of Dutch angles to make you feel really off kilter and off centered. To me, it was the only time in the movie he actually did something.
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean because, in a lot of movies, you're not really aware you're watching a movie. Totally, I don't know if that sounds dumb to say,
no, it does. No,
but
absolutely.
in this, I'm that's just that's how I'd set up a shot.
Yeah. It's just very. It's very just point and shoot. It's just get what you need to get. Whereas that moment, I was like, oh, there's some cool stuff happening. The shot of him coming up and down the hallway, love that shot, and then obviously the shot of him sitting down and crying, and it's just slowly going closer and closer to him. is amazing. But
what did you think of the fast forward through the house where he's like, it's all my fault. Like, it's all my fault.
Oh, I mean, that's a very 2012 sort of like
I didn't love it.
Late 2000s, early 2010s.
It felt different to the rest of the movie. Like, they never used that sort of thing. And then it was just like out of nowhere, he's like walking really fast and banging his head against walls.
Yeah,
but I think they were trying to just, because in the book you feel so panicked and you're
anxious,
feeling that breakdown. And I think obviously they just had to translate that. They
were trying to do that, yeah.
Maybe that's just a personal
opinion. No, I agree. Just
him crying in the chair.
Him crying in the chair is great.
Just more of that.
I think I didn't mind that because to me, again, it just felt like something was actually finally happening with the camera. And I was like, this is actually going to, like, it actually is kind of intriguing the way he did it. But a lot of that then falls on Logan's performance. So he's fantastic when the emotions are brutal, but he felt like a 15-year-old introvert kid. Like his mannerisms and his little walk, his like little floaty walk and stuff.
So funny when Mary Elizabeth drops him off after the dance and he stands in front of the car and the wave. I was dead. I thought that was hilarious.
But even like in those scenes, like the Truth or Dare scenes and stuff, like his reactions to things really strike me as a kid who's like, oh, this is all so different to me. And he's got just such an innocence in his face, Logan Lerman. Like, he's a good looking guy. He's a very good looking guy.
He is, if I do
he's
say
cute.
So myself,
he's very cute. He's got the cute little haircut, like the comb over there. So he's physically suits the role, but I think he got the introverted mannerisms correct, and also the boiling point, the bubbling pot of trauma and anxiety and depression and stuff that is sort of all coming to the surface.
He nailed it.
There's like sort of an unhingedness, not unhingedness, sorry.
I know,
like,
I know what you're saying. Like
it's
like
just
he's
all
unraveling
coming to
a bit.
Unraveling, yeah. Also loved Ezra Miller as Patrick.
He was good. I mean, cancelled, but
controversies aside, like, because I said the same thing for the Flash this year. Like, he is one of the best parts of the Flash. Obviously, a lot of personal issues that he's sorting through. Yeah,
titular character.
Yeah, not anymore. But like, he is. I think Ezra Miller is a fantastic actor. Fantastic in this film though. Like, just embodies Patrick's persona perfectly, and how Patrick is written in the book is very much how I envisioned it on the screen as well. It's just this loud, rambunctious person who loves making people feel happy, but you know that there's something under the surface that is like, it's like a mask. Everything's a bit, and he even says it himself about wearing a mask at one point. You know what I mean? So I love that. Emma Watson, bless her heart. I know we already kind of spoken about this back in the Harry Potter episode, but I just don't rate Emma Watson as an actress.
Do you know what the funny thing is? I read that they became very close on set, Chbosky and her, and then he actually wrote the original screenplay for Disney's Beauty and the Beast. I don't know if it ended up getting used through his connection. And I was like, so she was a standout to you in your film.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe not a standout, but maybe just a good friend.
Memorable. Memorable. Not maybe for the right reasons.
Maybe not for the right reasons.
Really changes. Like at the start, it's like so American, it's almost Boston-y, and then borderline Boston.
Hey, Charlie, come on to the football game.
And just when she's like, Bob's still trying to shag that waitress from the Olive Garden. I'm just like,
Charlie, you don't have to do that. That's how she's a head bobber. She's like every time. Like, that's all it is. Like, I just can't get around it. Nothing. And I said this around last night. I was like, it feels like theater, like over the top theater acting. Like, every line of dialogue has to be performed with this power and this presence, whereas you are in a scene directly with Logan Lerman, who has nuance to the character.
Yeah. She's just a very obvious actor.
Very obvious actor.
Like, she just she wasn't my favorite.
But even like speaking about Ezra Miller, who like
played a very over the top character and yet didn't feel like too much.
Right? Like, feels like Patrick. You know what I mean? Like, it's interesting. So, did you have anyone outside of the main three who was a standout?
I mean, I thought that girl who played Mary Elizabeth crushed it because she was like insufferable.
Mae Whitman.
Bless her.
I felt it's so funny watching that character too, because then that kind of also highlighted to me like the teenage experience of this exterior, like, I don't need anybody. Like, I'm an independent. She talks about like feminism and sexism and stuff in the, this was set in 1991 as well. So like even
it's a bit more radical
for its time, and like even progressive for its time to be like a feminist in the 90s. You know what I mean? But like, it's funny how she goes from this like almost militant feminist to like as soon as Charlie goes to the Sadie Hawkins dance with her, she's just in love, and she's like, I want a boyfriend and I want someone to hold hands with, and I just love their relationship. The montage of their short-lived relationship and then how that unravels.
In the book, it's even more frustrating.
Oh, she
just is insufferable.
But to me, it was like the best sort of like best written insufferable too. Like it was so
well
good.
Done.
It's I always use this as the example. Everyone talks about how much they hate Joffrey in Game of Thrones, but I'm like, you hate him because the guy who played him played him so well.
Yeah.
It was the same thing here. Like the insufferable nature of Mary Elizabeth is great in the book because I'm reading it going like, fuck Charlie, just leave. But it's so well written that you're kind of like, I'm kind of having fun with this. And the Mae Whitman does it so well in the film.
And you can sort of see why Charlie doesn't break up with her because he just got swept up in all of this by accident. He's too nice.
He's too bloody nice.
But then he's not so nice when he does break up with her in a game of truth or dare where Patrick dares him to kiss the prettiest girl in the room and he gets up and kisses Sam. And it's just...
Which is a very... Yeah, that's a big scene. That's a great scene in the movie.
And it really is like the start of Charlie not doing very well because obviously it causes a huge fight and he's told to stay away from the group for a while.
Yes.
Because, okay, so this was my thing. I was watching it with my boyfriend and my sister. And after this, obviously, they tell him he should take a break from the friendship group because he's upset everyone.
Yeah.
So they don't contact him for a really long time. He tries to call people and they're not picking up and like they're just like, no. And Liv goes, yeah, but she knew Mary Elizabeth since preschool and she's only known Charlie for 6 months. And I said, yes, but flash forward to a couple of weeks ago where Sam's sitting there like, I just want your first kiss to be with someone who loves you.
Yeah.
I love you so much, Charlie. Oh, but you've hurt her, so now I'm just going to completely cut you off when I know your best friend killed himself. You have no friends other than us and you have mental issues.
But it's a very...
That just feels very wrong to me.
Do you know what it feels like? It feels like an emotionally immature 17-year-old.
I know, but like she should have...
It's frustrating, don't get me wrong.
She should have checked on him. And like in the book when they don't call him for his birthday. As well.
Yeah, I know. It's
Patrick,
so rough.
none of them contacted him.
I feel like it would have been something Patrick would have done because Patrick is the first one really to get, because it's after the cafeteria fight.
Yeah, but he has to literally save Patrick's life.
Yeah.
If he hadn't done that, they weren't
They wouldn't have given a shit.
And if everything was okay then, why didn't anyone reach out to him?
It strikes me as something teenagers would do, though.
It just makes me wonder how genuine their friendship was, though. It was like this odd point where I'm like, there was just moments with Sam and Patrick where it really felt like Charlie was just this annoying, petty friendship.
Yeah, no, I get that.
I just don't understand how you can sit there and say to someone you love them so much and then just abandon them so entirely when you know what your friendship means to them.
That's a good point.
And it made me just resent them. Just give the kid a phone call.
That's
like,
all
I know
needs.
it was wrong, but you know he's younger than you. You know what he's like.
Yeah.
It was hard for him.
I think as well, like, that kind of takes me back to the first kiss scene of, like, I just think everyone's so confused and emotionally immature and doesn't know. None of them have direction. And it brings me to another person who I loved in this film. The only person giving some form of guidance and direction is Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, love the teacher.
By Paul Rudd. No one in the world could hate Paul Rudd.
It's
God, I
pretty much
love him
impossible.
so much. And he's so nice. This one, the way he delivers the iconic line, like, you get the love you think you deserve. I was like, and the final scene with them where he's like, you're the best teacher I've ever had. And the hug. Oh, I think that was a breaking point for Rhiannon as well. Actually, I think I remember hearing a massive outburst of tears. Like, I get it. Yeah. I get it. But like, that's the only person giving any form of direction to Charlie. And it's not even like advice, but it's him trying to find a way for him to facilitate his writing. And
it's just so nice to have a teacher believe in you. Like, I had an English teacher who gave me books out of class as well.
Oh, nice.
And it's just, I had my own perks moment. And, you know, it is nice that they see potential in you and as a kid recognize that you have like that emotional maturity to comprehend these like great works.
It must be nice. I don't remember that. But
you didn't get any books?
No.
They were like, you made it to class, Nick. Congratulations.
They were like, you can read. And I was like, I think so. I was like, you just watch me. One day I'll have a whole fucking podcast
They're
about
like, here's
reading.
a colour in.
Yeah, they're like, connect the dots 1 to 2. And I'm like, wait, what? Hold on, I'm 17 years old. I'm in grade 12. Why am I getting this? But yeah, I think it's done so well that like, and I think it kind of adds a little bit more to the sadness that the person who seemingly cares about him the most is his teacher. You know what I mean? Like that's.
I think cares about I think his parents care about him a lot. But
I agree.
Like to the most that they're capable.
Yeah,
and they're very different to him.
Very different.
I mean, his sister's very smart as well. She's a straight A student. Like I think she graduated 4th in her class.
I think so. Yeah.
So you know, like the family's obviously intelligent, but it's just like
actually quickly on the sister as well. There's a whole thing with her and about the abusive relationship with. Derek and
it's a really interesting commentary on power shift because obviously the sister had all the power.
Yes.
And then when he hit her, she felt like that shifted and she
became submissive. Like it was quite sad.
It was really sad to watch.
Charlie has to drive her to get an abortion.
And that's finally makes her break up with the boyfriend because he says, oh, it's not mine.
It's rough, hey? Like, fuck. That's you're right about the book is super fucking melancholy, hey?
Yeah, definitely like the themes feel heavier.
Yeah, God.
Even Patrick's meltdown after Brad when he's spending that time with Charlie. Like in the book, it feels... it just feels worse.
Yeah, no, it does.
Like it just feels so sad.
Even the scene in the park in the film is kind of like it's still a very tough moment to watch because I think it's one of those things where you think like put yourself in the shoes of a openly gay kid in the 90s who is in love with someone and who has had Brad say, I love you back, and then have that all fall away and have Brad call you a slur and have Brad embarrass you in front of everyone, especially someone who's probably as prideful as Patrick as well, like someone who's so self-assured about who they are, to have it all ripped away in front of people as well.
And then in the book, they go... the book, Patrick's, yet again, this is another commentary on their friendship with Charlie. Patrick takes Charlie to a park where... gay people hook up and just abandons him on a chair. He's like this 15-year-old kid in a park full of adult gay men.
I remember hearing the line in the book where he talks about taking him to the park and I was like, no, don't do that.
I was like, what are you doing?
Don't, because I remember what happened in the book. And then I was like, I'm glad it doesn't happen in the movie. But like,
and then Charlie gets approached by this guy, but then he realizes that it's actually a prominent sports anchor.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the guy gets freaked out because Charlie recognizes
his dad's
him
watching sport on TV all the time.
Well, and then because of the brother, he's like, I wanted to ask him if my brother would do any good at football, but he like ran away, sort of thing. And then Patrick sees Brad in the park with that other guy, which is pretty sad.
There's a lot of sad shit that happens in this. But yeah, I think, and then obviously wrapping it up, like I think both the film and the book are at least have hopeful endings. The tunnel, Charlie's monologue about being infinite and finally deciding that he wants to accept love and for himself and whatnot is really well written in the book. The monologue is delivered great in the film, but I also think David Bowie's Heroes is a big part of why. Like that scene gave me goosebumps. Like watching him in the back of the truck and sort of seeing how Sam's looking at him and then he's not like I found it interesting in the movie how it's like Sam is looking at him so happy and this is by the time they've gone, like Sam's gone to college and stuff. They've been away for a couple of months. But Charlie was still focused on himself and he was like, I'm taking this moment for me and this is about my next step and what I'm going to do next. And branching out now, I don't have Sam and Patrick here, and then he stands up and Heroes is fucking blasting as he comes out the tunnel. Like, it's a really moving moment that I think, like I said, monologue's great in the book, but the film just like nailed it on the head the way that ends the film. So yeah, I thought it was a really beautiful ending.
Yeah, it was. It was a beautiful ending. I mean, it's still got that like sadness to it. Like you just hope Charlie's going to be okay. You hope he finds friends. Like it's definitely not wrapped up 100% neatly, but it kind of like that because as a young adolescent, your life's not wrapped up. Your life's just starting.
Y'all got a lot of time to go. A lot of time to live. A lot of things to do. But I think the monologue kind of talks about that though as well. Like we'll
be pictures one day. We'll be
oh man, when he said that, holy shit. But even in the sense of like the movie wasn't necessarily about making everything okay. It's making sure that Charlie's taken the next step in the right direction. And I think it's nice that that's sort of where the movie ends rather than being like And 10 years later, like Charlie's married with a kid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it would have been shit. It's not what the movie's about. It's not what the story's about.
I feel so bad. I just don't think Sam and Patrick are that good of friends to him. And I just feel like they won't call.
Yeah. No, I'll get that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame them. They got a lot going on in college and everything.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I just don't think that they would stay in touch.
Yeah.
It's just from the whole Mary Elizabeth.
Do you think Charlie realizes that though?
Well, I think he's felt that at times. Like, did I mention they didn't call him on his birthday? I
feel
like I might have mentioned that.
I think I remember reading that.
Yeah. I was like, you guys are the fucking worst. I was like, how dare you not call him? I'm like, what's Charlie's number? I'm like, happy birthday, baby.
Poor Charlie.
Poor Charlie. I would have to say that the thing about the movie for me, even in some elements of the book, I think some things that resonated with me and I thought was so beautiful as a teenager maybe were a bit cringe to me now.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, but that's growing up, right?
Like, it is, yeah. Like... But in the moment, like the We Are Infinite, I just was like, oh, wow. Like, that's just had my bowler hat on and I was like, this is so, I was like, yeah, my friend, and I was like, this is so deep. And like, I am an indie queen. Like, I'm so much deeper and smarter than everyone else because I'm reading this just at school with my book out. Like, everyone look at me, I read.
I think that's part of Stephen Chbosky's magic is that he was also a middle-aged man when he wrote this story, right? Or, you know, maybe late 20s, early 30s, whatever. And I think he understood that. He's like, that is probably profound for a 15-year-old.
I think back in the day also like this was one of the first original like big things in that like Tumblr era.
Yeah, totally.
So like back then maybe it didn't feel so stereotypical, but this really was like when you think about time. And when you think about it, like a lot have come out since this, but I would say this was like one of the first kind of like
I get that.
Ones in this like it was before Fault in Our Stars, like before all of those like, you know, really it was a starting point for that genre.
Like, for lack of a better word, like romantic young adult.
But a bit alternate. Like, it's not mainstream romance. It's like that little bit like we're so indie and cool and we talk about The Great Gatsby and like we're really cultured and smart. Yeah. Like, this was kind of one of the first
It's less fairy tale and more.
It was just like... Yeah, I don't know, like a bit more pretentious.
No, it's a fair point.
So I think in the moment it was a bit unique, and then now obviously the genre's more flooded and there's
more
a lot
saturated.
Of those kind of movies. But
it's a great point actually. Yeah. I'm actually trying to rack my brain to think, but like it definitely I feel like started that cultural movement, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, Tumblr movie is the best way to put it as well. But I think the difference between at least Perks and some of the others, like I mean, Fault in Our Stars is a good example, is that.
Like the whole John Green saga.
John Green and everything is so much more about the romance than it is about coming of age. You know what I mean? Like
it's still like a bit more mainstream because it's got that romance. But
whereas like there are romantic elements, and obviously there is the big thing about Charlie's infatuation with Sam. But to me, the story is more about Charlie.
It's about growing up and about trauma.
Yeah, which I don't see many of these other alternative indie young adult stories dealing with suicide, child abuse.
Maybe suicide.
But
I think suicide got glamorized by things like 13 Reasons Why, especially the first season, and that other one. It's like what's it called? Can't remember, but just all those like sort of.
I think suicide is actually handled quite well in this film. It's in the sense of like, and the book as well. It's just quite matter of fact with it, but that's how Charlie is dealing with it at the time. When he reveals in the film, like he has the pot brownies super high. Sam's making him a milkshake. So he wants a milkshake, and he just goes, "Oh yeah," and my friend Michael. He's talking about his friend Michael. She's like, "Where's Michael now?" He's like, "Oh, he shot himself in the head last May."
I wish he'd left a note.
That's a heartbreaking line. I wish he left a note. Fuck. But you know what I mean? Like that. I think suicide is dealt more as matter of fact rather than a tool to be like manipulate emotion as well. Whereas I think a lot of stories, especially young adult stories, 13 Reasons Why is a great example, is that glamorizing suicide in that way is
it's like you're a deep person if
you're supposed to be sad and like it's just like remember suicide is really sad and really bad and we're going to show you it, whereas like
but I feel like it's almost like it's like these ones like I've read so many like We Were Liars. Like there's just so many of these teen books or young adult books in this sort of realm that I've read, and they really make out like if you're thinking about suicide, you're so like emotional and so smart to be thinking about the heaviness of the world. Like
existentialism and existence.
It's not a glamorous thing to think about suicide. You need help. You're a young person with raging hormones who's maybe dealing with trauma, maybe just sad, and that's okay, but you should seek help. It's not something to make a character interesting.
No, it's
and that
exactly
really
right.
frustrates me about those type of works.
Even with Charlie, when he talks about Helen's self-harm and how that's, you know, an option. The movie does it where you kind of go like, he sees Helen cutting her wrists and then he looks to a knife and your immediate thought is like, obviously you don't want Charlie to do it, but I'm glad that's where they cut away. We don't get this crazy scene where like Charlie's like holding the knife like close to his wrists.
I
and
love
stuff.
the way they did that. It was just like
it's
subtle,
brilliant because it's just like you said, it's not a part of who Charlie's character is, but it's something he's going through right in that moment. And we've had enough of the movie to understand what his mental state and process is like. Yeah. To be like, he is probably in a position at the moment where he thinks that is the only option. But it's not a whole thing where it's like, you know, I think of like if there's like an indie story that like starts with someone's suicide and then you watch the whole journey up to it. It's like, I don't want like unless it's going to be informative or you're actually going to do something different. Like again, it's not a part of a character's personality and not their traits.
No,
which there is definitely been done to death in the most stupid of ways by writers. It's lazy writing. First of all, it's like emotionally manipulative.
Not something that should be glamorized.
And stuff can be emotionally manipulative and you can call it out, but like when you use someone taking their own life to do it, it's fucked.
And leaving people tapes and leaving kids with with the guilt their whole life. Anyway, that show's good.
I never watched it actually.
Lucky you.
4 seasons of some shit.
That's one.
Back to Perks.
Back to Perks. I will say there were some also. So the cringe moments, like the infinite thing, didn't hit as hard for me. The "We accept the love we think we deserve" still hit.
No, I think that's quite universal.
That's not corny. I think that's a genuinely good line, nice. And it's so true.
Yep.
But then there was some added lines, especially to Emma Watson, and whether it was the line or the delivery. So one of the ones where I was like, please stop, was when she goes to Charlie, "Welcome to the land of misfit toys."
I was like, I think I wrote that down.
I was like, what? I was like, no.
Oh, the toast to Charlie. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, God.
I
didn't like that whole
toast. It's cringy, but it works for the character Craig, where they're like, "Oh, Craig, you write poetry?" He's like, "Poetry writes me."
But
I was like, "Fuck you, Craig." No,
I think the thing was like that was more taking the piss of him. But I'm
totally.
Like, but also
that's how Charlie would have seen that comment, right?
But also your characters are literally like that, but being serious.
Yes,
on several occasions. So it didn't really work because it wasn't like a group of unpretentious people and then this pretentious douchebag. Like they're all a bit pretentious. They all think
Charlie
they're very cultured.
Charlie included.
He's less
but
like
he's less.
He's more like exploring these things, and he feels more genuine.
I think as well the reason that line worked for me is because, like you said earlier, we're seeing all of this from Charlie's perspective anyway. So he watches Craig say that, and we just sit there and go, "You're a fucking wanker, dude." Yeah. Like that is such a pretentious thing to say. So I think that's why that line worked for me, though. Yeah. So,
but the Emma Watson, the Misfit Toys,
Toys did not work. No, it's again. Tumblr. The Tumblr movie.
It's so Tumblr.
It's a Tumblr era sort of thing.
Oh, I didn't like that
Speaking of funny moments, I just read this. I love when he's on LSD and he's shoveling the snow. I just thought that was a great scene
that's a good one.
Well, that's perks of being a wallflower, Georgia.
Yeah.
Thank you for the pick. But now we've got to do what we love doing.
Did you like it?
The movie?
In general.
Oh yeah, no, I did because I think it was for me. It was just an excuse to watch the movie again as well because I ended up giving it 4 stars.
That's pretty
on
good.
Letterboxd. So yeah, like I just thought I think the direction's a bit bland. I think Emma Watson brings it down a little bit. It's a movie of its time, Tumblr movie. But I think the story is well written. I was really engaged in Charlie's story, and I think Logan Lerman, Ezra Miller, Paul Rudd, I think they are brilliant. I think they give some of their best performances in this movie. So it's one of those. But we need to know, Georgia, this book that revolutionized your literary journey. is it better than the film that brought all of us except me to tears at some point?
I think of them both as having their positives.
Yes, totally, yeah.
But for me, in terms of what just made me feel, it was the book. Like the book just filled me with this emotion. I can't even I just got more from it than the movie.
Totally.
I felt more. I was like, it sat with me. I love the book. So it's the book for me.
Yeah, I get it. And look, it's the movie for me just because I struggled a little bit with the structure.
Yeah, that's fair.
Of the
I was like,
book.
I don't agree, but that's all right.
No, hey.
That's the point of the show, isn't it?
You're wrong, but I'm okay with you being wrong.
We haven't been on the same page. Like, we haven't been on different pages, sorry. We've been on the same page.
Recently, we've been I think very much so. I think Harry Potter and this one is the only two we've been very sort of strictly, because I agree. I think the book is a great insight into Charlie's mind, but I think, and maybe it is, which is funny for me, the tonal nature of the film I enjoyed more than the melancholy of the book, which is coming from me who was like, Fight Club's a comedy, right? I love that sort of shit. But I agree with you. I think the book is still very, I think the story and the overall narrative and the way characters are fleshed out, I do think it's a well realized book from Chbosky. So it's not one where I was like, you just need the movie, just need the book. I think what you said earlier about the tone is right, and I think the book's about the family and the movie's about the friends. So it's fun. And if that was Chbosky's intention with the screenplay to be like, let's expand Patrick and Sam more because I didn't in the book, I think it's a very cool way to do that. So, but I would definitely go back and watch the movie again before reading the book.
Yeah.
I think the goosebumps it left me with at the end when Heroes is blasting through the speakers.
But it makes me a bit uncomfortable because it makes me feel so much. So that's why I don't rewatch it.
That's fair. No, I get that.
Like sometimes you're like, oh, it's too much.
Oh man, I love it. I love feeling.
Yeah,
so
it takes a bit.
I need movies to do that. I need movies to realize emotion. So I'm like, more. As we were talking about the Saw franchise before recording this episode, I'm like, I'm trying to justify why that's enjoyable. Wait until they do a novelization of Saw. We'll have to do that on the show.
Talking about scary books, I think our next book's a bit scary.
Oh, okay. I haven't read the book, so I can't comment on that. I don't think the movies is scary, but I can understand why.
Imagine getting dropped in an arena and having to kill other kids.
And that's to me
scary.
sounds like a good fucking time. So for November, to celebrate the release, we're sort of timing it with the release of the new Hunger Games film, The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes. Georgia and I are going back all the way to, well, I was going to say all the way to the beginning.
I'm nervous to read this one again.
That's a prequel. We're going to do The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins.
Yeah, that's the one.
And obviously watch the blockbuster film that took the world by storm, The Hunger Games. So
what is it again? What's the sign?
The three fingers.
Three fingers, or
So we are doing the first Hunger Games book and the first Hunger Games film on the November episode of The Book Was Better. So I haven't read the book. Obviously, I've seen the film. I have thoughts about the film.
I feel like the book's more disturbing, but that's from my recollection.
That excites me, though. That excites me.
But you have to think, like, when I read the book, I went in blind. Like, there was no movie.
Totally.
I was like, what am I? And then it's like,
all these kids are getting
harrowing.
threatened.
Yeah,
okay.
Like
I'll definitely try and read it in that sort of mindset.
Fresh.
Yeah,
it's probably been a while since you've watched the movies. That might help.
Yeah, like I don't think I've seen the first movie since the last Mockingjay came out, which was 2015.
It's not a rewatch for me.
No, not Mockingjay, that's for sure. So that'll be the next episode. So, but give you time to read the book and watch the film before that. But thank you again for watching. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, like, all that jazz. Anywhere you're listening to this, if you subscribe, that helps us out a lot. Thank you for making just each episode go from strength to strength. Our red, white, and royal blue episode is still pumping. So thank you all for that. We love you all for that. And we will see. Oh, no. Well, where can they find you on the internet, George?
You can find plugs. On Instagram, you can find me at withg.co.
And I'm at nicksflicksfix on Instagram, and I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. I don't want to call it X yet. At nicksflicksfix, you can find all our movie review stuff there. But until the next episode, thanks so much for watching. The Book Was Better.
Thanks, guys. Bye.